Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. This is John Massengale, and I am sitting in the studio in Austin, Texas for the first time since mid-March. I am alone in the studio, but I'm joined over Zoom by Mr. Les Kaiser. How's it going, Mr. Kaiser?
Good morning. Good morning.
And we also have Mr. Dave O'Neill calling in from Barber Motorsports Racetrack. He's out there doing a little work. Mr. O'Neill, how are you?
I'm very good. Lovely morning over here. Looking forward to getting the day started.
Well, I am looking forward to the second round of the Formula One season again this week in Austria for the Styrian Grand Prix, not the Austrian Grand Prix. But, you know, guys, I was thinking when I was watching the practice and then qualifying that, you know, when you think you're going to go back to back, you think, it might be a little boring. Are we going to, is it going to be anything new? But man, there was so much going on that it was just as exciting as going to a new circuit. I don't know how about you guys, but I felt that way.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely livened up with the qualifying and the way they ran it in place of the practice three. But so, yeah, that was a very exciting situation just in general. But the way the cars landed still provided some surprises.
Yes, and look, with all the rain, obviously that helped add some excitement to what was going on. And man, it was pouring down rain, and look, let's face it, it's we've got so much going on. All the cars, haven't had, with all that time off, it just kind of feels like they're hit the reset button. And Dave, being the former team manager, you've had to deal with situations, but probably nothing quite like that. That's got to be a pretty intense situation for them, having to kind of hit the reset button and try to fix all the problems, because we had, 9 cars that didn't finish. But Dave, how'd you like to be in that position, have to start over and try to get everything going after such a crazy first week?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Although we talk about it in a week cycle, there's not much time off that anyone would have had there. So after the Sunday, the race, the cars would have been stripped down and gone through, serviced, different power units or parts of the power units changed, all the brakes, all the Friday equipment ready to go on the car for FP1 and FP2. So really and truly, the teams, they didn't get any time off. They would have been back in Monday morning at 8:30 in the morning and cracking on with prepping the cars and looking at all the data and seeing where they can go wrong. And of course, the biggest thing is the reaction time that you struggle with, because if you do have a failure, you've got to analyse the failure. The part needs shipping back to the UK or Italy. That needs looking at. I mean, I'm sure there was photographs and emails sent with everything on the Sunday night after the race, and then from that point, you still then got to redesign, modify, ask for clarification, permission to get the modifications done, and then once that's happened, you then need to manufacture it. So I bet that some of the parts coming into this race only landed in the paddock on this Saturday night yesterday to go on the cars for the race today. So not a lot of time, but F1's good at reacting, and that's what their qualities are, is to react, get the job done, and try and overcome the problems. If you had it in a normal OEM, where you get your recalls and your car goes into the garage, those sometimes take a year. Obviously, a huger example, but you have to get it tested, made, shipped out, notify everyone that the part needs to go on the car. So it'll be interesting to see who's conquered the demons of last week, and see who comes back this week for the race itself in a reliable fashion.
Well, speaking of teams working late, Haas F1 just tweeted. They said that the stewards have ruled that Romain Grosjean must start the race from the pit lane after work was carried out last night unsupervised under Parc Fermé conditions due to mitigating circumstances. although that doesn't change much, um, really considering start time, I mean, position. But that's exactly what just happened with the Haas F1 team. And you know what, Dave? Since you used to manage that team, and I mean, we were just before we went on air, we were just talking about the braking issues, and I was sitting there thinking, okay, they've got some problem with the brakes right there at the rotor or whatever. But you were thinking that the cooling issue might be a little more systemic than that.
Yeah, it's and again, when you're not at the coal face of it, things change, and it's hard to understand the real story. But reading into it, by the sounds of it, they did have brake issues, both cars, and they had to manage. They quite clearly said they had to manage the brakes from lap one of the race last week. But what tends to happen is you have to choose your cooling package, and the cooling package ranges from brake cooling to cooling the fluids in the engine, and keeping that part of the power unit in its temperature working range. So I would hazard a guess that it's the brakes were the problem, but if you put bigger brake ducts on the front of the car, that also closes the air gap for the cooling to the radiators in the car. So maybe they had to, change the cooling for the radiators in order to make a compromise for the brake cooling.
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see how Haas reacts this season because it has not started off well and it's looking pretty rough. But hey, let me give out the phone number in case anybody wants to join us. If anybody's up and early, maybe in the car, but want to give it out so anybody can call us up and maybe talk to Dave, ask him a question. The number is 512-643-LIVE, 512-643-5483. Give us a call. We want to hear what you have to say. But guys, let's talk about the race today. So the Styrian Grand Prix back in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. And, like we mentioned earlier in the show, we had 9 cars that did not finish the race last weekend. I would expect that they're going to get this a little more under control and we'll have less failures. But who knows for sure about that? And what about qualifying and the way the grid lined up? Because in fact, let's run down that a little bit because it was a pretty interesting qualifying with all the rain and everything. We ended up having to use the FP2 times, but so Lewis Hamilton. Let's run down the starting grid. Let's do that. Lewis Hamilton first, Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon, Alexander Albon, Pierre Gasly, Ricardo and Lando Norris in 9th, and Sebastian Vettel in 10th. But really. And Leclerc at 11th, but that was due to a couple of grid penalties there. So, I guess we'll talk about Ferrari too with all the troubles they had. But Dave, do you have any thoughts about the qualifying? It was pretty crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean the rain definitely mixes things up, and it sorts the man out from the boys. So I think everyone has a story to tell in wet qualifying, and it's one of those things that the circuit's never the same for any 1 minute while it's raining. So it's picking your moment to go out, and also making sure you've got a car that you're confident with. There's not much you can change on the car quickly, so it's literally just putting more wing on, and obviously having the wet tyres on. And then obviously some of the settings for the traction control, settings for the diff, throttle settings as well, which you can change around and help it make more of a drivable car in the wet.
Well, if we thought we were going to have to use those Q2 times, I don't remember having had to do that. We had a massive rainstorm here in Austin that time, but we moved qualifying to Sunday morning. But it was nice to be able to get actual qualifying in, even though it was, 45 minutes late or something like that. And have you seen that, Dave? Have we ever had to use in your recent history that we have to use the Q2 times like that?
Yes, I knew you were going to ask that, and I'm trying to rewind my memory. I think Brazil rings a bell actually, because the weather there is pretty strange. But I can't pinpoint it right now. But it has been done. I think probably 4 or 5 years ago it was done.
Yeah, it seems like I remember one too. I don't remember exactly, but well, Les Kaiser, what about you? What were your impressions? I know you were just like me. We all get up early, but then we have to sit and wait for qualifying to actually start with the rain. What was your
I,
what was your thoughts on qualifying?
my thoughts were, I was surprised at Lance Stroll. I know we pick on him a bit, but that he handily outperformed Sergio on this. Sergio had some issues, I'll say just in control, but Lance is really showing well in wet conditions. This isn't the first time we've seen that happen. It happened last year at one of the races. I recall that he kind of stuck his head up above where we did expect him at that time. So pleased to see Lance earn what I just got to, I heard somebody talking about, said Lance has to be the lowest salary driver on the grid since he's probably living in dad's basement, but that's okay. He's on the grid.
Does he even get a salary, or does Pop just give him the card and let him go? But you know what? I don't want to give him a hard time either, because he's obviously proven that he can be fast. You know, we have it's been fun to joke about, but he's proven that he's got the ability to be a quick race driver. But so
absolutely. I mean, he wound up 13th on the grid. You know, through that, you don't get there just because of dad's money. You get there with quality skills.
Well, it is, one of the other stories I want to talk about is Lewis Hamilton does what Lewis does and put an amazing lap down and took the pole position. And Max Verstappen, of course, quick again. But Carlos Sainz, another great start to the weekend for Renault, obviously with Lando Norris on podium last week, but Carlos Sainz, first time qualifying on the podium, I believe. But yeah, Carlos Sainz looking good, and Bottas in fourth, Esteban in fifth, and Lando again, another McLaren Renault in sixth. But the McLaren cars, I mean, are we looking at best of the rest? I mean, yeah. What do you think, Dave?
I certainly think that McLaren have got their goods together this year. We've only obviously been to one track, so it's difficult to say. But certainly their aero package seems to be good. The engine's strong. You can see where Ocon is. He's knocking in the right space as well. But I think the McLaren has got the legs on the Renault. And it will be, I think, a good result for McLaren this weekend. And it'd be nice to see Lando back up there as well, raising the British flag.
Yeah, Lando has been super fun to watch in the off season, of course, with all his virtual racing and online with all the different, and going over to the virtual series from Indy and winning one of the races. What was that? I think it was the Coda race that he won, but going to Indy's virtual series and winning that. So he's done some amazing things off season. He's fun to watch, and he's good for the sport. I remember interviewing him here in Austin last year, and he is a little bit irreverent, but he's professional. But he had some trouble. He had some back pain after free practice 2, right? I believe it was. And he had some back pain and wasn't sure that he was even going to do qualifying, but he ended up doing well. And again, like I agree, Dave, I know he's, for you, raising the British flag, like you said, but I think that he's just fun to watch, and he's obviously a talented race driver too. I love all these new young race drivers, but yeah, go ahead, Les.
The other thing with Lando is, he got knocked for passing under the yellow flag, but that was 3 grid spots. He also got 2 penalty points, and that goes towards that 12-month accumulation. I'm trying to remember how many points that is, but that basically is
12 points less.
12 points. There you go. Thanks, Dave. Leave it to the team manager. So throughout the next 12 months, if he accumulates up to 12 points, he faces more scrutiny, more penalties, things like that, in jeopardizing or basically, unsafe maneuvers primarily.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. Well, guys, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what to look for in today's race because there are some very interesting stories. And, we got Hamilton and Verstappen at the front. That's always going to be good. Well, we'll start with that, and we'll talk about all the other things. And write this number down, 512-643-5483. Give us a call if you want to give us your input. You listen to Speed City, back after these messages.
Hi, this is Gene Haas, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about the rain that was happening all weekend in Austria for the Styrian Grand Prix in Formula One. But today, it's looking a little better. Mr. Kaiser, let's give us a weather report.
Well, let's see. I don't have conditions on the wind. We don't have Jonathan Green to look at the skirts and see which way they're blowing, as he's done many times for us. But it's bright and sunny, it appears, from the interviews that were just happening. I was popping in and looking at a few of the interviews, seeing some of the background. It looks like a good day for racing. The interviews are newsworthy too, and I know we're going to get to some of those topics soon.
All right, well, I think let's start with what we talked about going to break, and that's what to really look for today. And at the front of the grid, it couldn't get really more exciting because we got Hamilton versus Verstappen. Hamilton 1, Verstappen 2. And, it doesn't really get any better when you think about Hamilton, Mr. Precision, Mr., absolutely mistake-free. And then you think of the emotional, but obviously supremely talented Max Verstappen battling it out. And I don't know if that Red Bull can keep up with that Mercedes, but I'm really excited to see that. Dave, I want to come to you first. What do you expect to see between those two, especially at the start of the race?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we're looking for is what we looked for last weekend, was to get those two to pull the gloves off. I I think if Max doesn't have the reliability problems, and he has the similar sort of strategy with the tyres, which is to run long on the mediums, I think, if I'm correct in saying, there's a good chance that he can bring it to Lewis. And also, I'm not quite sure, but with Albon, he had some mechanical failure on its way, I believe, for the last race. So I think Red Bull on that side, if they stay together, I do believe that it can be reasonably close. We also can't forget how quick Lewis was last race when he was reeling in Valtteri. So that bit is a bit unclear for me at the minute, is how Lewis can manage the tyres along with Verstappen. But I think the real fight is going to be, from second to sixth. There's an awful lot going on there as well, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yes, and let's talk about that just real quick again. You talked about the top of the show, but Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen at the top, but then right behind them and the times between them, and we've got that advantage again this year, is that midfield is going to be really interesting. But Carlos Sainz in third, Bottas fourth, Ocon in fifth, Albon in sixth, Gasly, Ricciardo, Norris, and Vettel, and then Leclerc. And then, part of that story part of the story today is George Russell doing so well in that Williams. He's sitting in 12th. And Les, what do you think? Think George Russell can get some points today?
George Russell, this is going to be his best opportunity. For one, I don't recall Williams being up in this standing at the beginning of the race, at the start of the race in years, to be honest. I can't recall anything different, and I love that it's George Russell that brought him there.
Yeah, and he's a fun kid to watch, and he also did well in the offseason in the virtual series because he won the Formula One virtual series. I mean, Leclerc and Lando didn't race a couple of the races, but he ended up winning it. But yeah, he's obviously a very good driver and being held back by the Williams machine. But hey, man, if they can get some points, that would be one of the big stories of the day, no doubt about it. Let's think about what else. What about Racing Point? They've looked. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other thing we haven't talked about is the prancing horse.
Yep.
And they're struggling a bit for one reason or another. And maybe they've got their mojo back again. I don't think they've got the pace that the top two guys have, or top two teams rather. But I think they could be maybe a surprise to put it into the top three this weekend. They certainly managed it last weekend with Leclerc. There's possibly stuff going on in Vettel's head at the minute. He doesn't seem to be in a happy place. When you've got two drivers that are in a happy place, you can develop the car a lot quicker than you can with one doing all the work. So that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting as well to see how the strategy plays out there, whether they try a split strategy on that side. But yeah, the Racing Point is again reasonably strong again this week as well.
Well, I want to stick with Ferrari because I'm glad you brought it up, because really that's some of the biggest stories in the last week are Ferrari, because number one, they brought upgrades to the car, and I didn't really see any results of those upgrades in qualifying. And I know we had rain and everything, so I guess we got to hold off till today to see that, and I'm glad we got some dry weather to see what Ferrari can do. If you missed last week's race, for example, and just looked at the standings and saw Leclerc come in second in the race last week, you think, okay, it's going to be another Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull season. But Ferrari they did not look fast in week one. And if they don't have some major upgrades, if those major upgrades don't really come to fruition, then we may not see them battling up near the front again this week. And that just, if Ferrari is not fast, that in itself is a story.
That was one of so Seb was one of the ones that I caught a part of that interview. And basically he sounded positive. I'll say he sounded positive. He looked somewhat deadpan. He seemed to be touting the team line of we've got some improvements, we're looking forward, blah 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 blah. But he just looked like he was going through the motions. And quite honestly, I think 2021 is more what he's thinking about. He's had no's from so many folks now. I don't know what's left for a 2021 option.
Well, that's true, and that is a whole nother aspect to this. But let me read a little bit about what's going on with Ferrari, because the upgrades include a new front wing, which, I mean, look, as we know, that's one of the most important components on an F1 car. A new rear diffuser with lots of new floor for Charles Leclerc to test, and Ferrari and is it Vettel? You talking about Vettel? Vettel said that the timesheets weren't great, like I mentioned, but Vettel insisted that he was feeling a lot happier, and that's a quote from him after spending Friday testing with all the upgrades. But according to him, that the new parts have made a big difference on the car, on drivability, and that's the exact opposite of what he was saying about the balance going into last week. And Dave, I want to you're now driver coach and you got all this experience. What about that? When he talks about the drivability, is it just the stability? Does that give him confidence? What would you read from what he said about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it's kind of a multifaceted answer, really, is that, like you alluded to, the front wing is the most important bit. It's where all the air meets, the car meets the air, and then it gets distributed around. The other point would be it might be more comfortable to drive, but they haven't done any long runs on it. So what we don't know, if it is more comfortable to drive, is it quicker, is the first question, because comfortable to drive could be slower. And then from that point, you have to... Sorry?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So if it's comfortable to drive, it could be slower. And then, of course, have they done any race runs, and what's going to happen with the tyres? You've got three different choices of tyres there, and which will suit that wing the best, and how long will they last? Will they degrade after 4 or 5 laps and become difficult to drive? Will they be fantastic? And that's the question you only get with time answered on any of these upgrades you bring to the circuit. You might actually find, in my experience, you test them, you put them on the car, and you won't race them for another race until you've gathered enough data to go that way. Formula One inherently is normally erring on the side of caution. You've got 71 laps to do, so you have to have a car that's going to be pretty neutral all the way through that race period, and predictable, of course, as well. You obviously have the degradation of the tyres, which is slow, but every lap you lose pace, you lose grip, and then you have to figure out where you're going to be at that point, and that's what the teams will be doing is simulating hundreds of thousands of race simulations before the race today. So yeah, interesting on Ferrari's side. I'd say if they do race the bits, they have to be very confident that they're going to do the trick for this weekend, and give them what they want, which is a faster car over the longer distance.
Yeah. Well, guys, let's go ahead and take our next break. It's about that time, but when we come back, there's been some stories we hadn't even talked about, huge stories. Fernando Alonso coming back to Formula One. We had 2 new races added to the 2020 calendar. So we'll talk about all that, and we'll continue to talk about what to look for in the race. You're listening to Speed City's coverage of Formula One on SiriusXM. We'll be back after a quick break.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show, man. We are excited. We are about 40 minutes from the start of the second round of the 2020, the pandemic-delayed 2020 season. This is John Massengill sitting in the studio for the first time since March. That's what I'm just as excited about, being back in my happy place in the studio. But I still got the boys out there on the phone and on Zoom. We hadn't even talked about Jonathan Green. Jonathan is up. He is so lucky. Here in Austin, it was 106 degrees. I was out at the lake, and it was 106 degrees. It was just insane. But Jonathan is up in Brainerd, Minnesota, basically on the border of Canada. And I looked, and I think it was 79 for the high yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh, I know there's a heat wave all over the country. So Jonathan, his choice of work this weekend is a very smart choice. But hey, guys, let's continue.
Wait a minute, where's Dave?
Well, Dave, that's true. I didn't even tell where Dave was.
Dave's not here.
Dave's not. Dave's at Barber Motorsports Park doing some driver coaching out there. Yeah, Dave, tell everybody what you're doing real quick.
Yeah, it's kind of a couple of track day events. So we're just running some radicals here up at Barber. Pretty warm, 93 yesterday, 93 today. Rain due at midday. So, but yeah, pretty warm and very humid. I haven't really experienced that sort of weather before. But, well, apart from Singapore and Malaysia, but not in the States anyway.
Well, just wait till you get back to Austin. You'll get it. It's I don't know what's happening, but it's just insane. But hey, guys, before we get into it, we got a caller on the line. We have Greg on the line. Hey, Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. I had a quick question, or just looking for your guys' opinion regarding Alonso and going into Renault, and wondering if it's something that Renault sees in him for development like the McLaren did, and, what the mentality behind that may be. Because, McLaren wasn't competitive with him in it, even though they made great strides. They really have become competitive now. And I'm just wondering where that leads to.
I think there's a lot of good reasons to hire Fernando Alonso. I mean, you can talk both ways about this. I'm going to let Dave answer the question about the development, but just real quick before that, I think that number one, it's great for the brand, right? For the Renault brand, it shows a commitment. Obviously, number one, from a financial commitment, but also from just the fact that they are saying, if they're telling Alonso, if he's coming back, then that means 2022, they think they might have a car competitive enough to start battling for podiums. We heard that before, but Dave, what do you think about his question on the development side?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and when you're looking it from the outside in, it's like, well, why would you do that? So in order to answer the question, I would say McLaren was a different ball game completely because of the Honda experience. As we've seen, they got there eventually, and they've done it really well with Red Bull. There was a huge amount of pain that they had to go through, but one of the things that happened was that the engine got put in the car 1 year too early from the agreed date that they were going to put the engine in the car. So there was a huge amount of development that missed the McLaren. And then inherently what happened after that, everyone saw on TV with Alonso sitting in his deck chair in Brazil, not finishing races and all that. So that's kind of where the McLaren side fell apart. But why would he want to come back? I think the reason he wants to come back is because that's all he loves doing is driving. He doesn't feel he's old enough to retire. I don't think he is either. I think he's still got an awful lot to give to the sport. He's a huge pull. He's fast. He's fully committed every time he gets in the car, and he's very passionate. And I think that's why Renault had him back. He's going back to his old home, effectively, where he won 2 world championships. And also, we can't take away that the engine is strong or the power unit is strong. It's in the back of the Red Bull. Sorry, excuse me. It's in the back of the McLaren, and that has some decent pace. Renault are in the middle of growing. They've employed an awful lot of people to get the car back to where it should be aero-wise, and as a system in itself. So I guess it's probably his only choice. It's not a bad choice, and also everything he says when it comes to feedback is going to get listened to. I think he's still fit enough. Mentally, he's in the right place to do it. He's had a bit of time off. He's probably missed it, and he's ready to go again. So I think, all in all, it's a good package. Whether it will work and be the sort of coming together that we like as a fairy tale, I'm not so sure will happen, because you've got the top 2-3 teams that are very, very, very strong year after year, and still looking at ways of getting their car on the pace this year as well, and also developing cars for 2021 already. So I don't know. It depends how long his game plan is to be there, and if he's committed until he hangs his gloves up. But it'd be interesting to see how it pans out.
Well, I
hope that answers your question.
I love the way you answered Greg's question, because I've listened to all the pundits talk about Alonso and everything, but I think you summed it very quick. You said he's fast. We know that. We saw him in the Indy 500 leading for 100 laps. He's fully committed. That's Alonso, right? And he's passionate. I mean, you really can't ask for any more than those three right there. And whatever happens, if any race driver brings those three, that's going to be a positive. So, Greg, where are you calling from? He dropped off the line. Well, that's a great question, Greg. We appreciate you calling in. It looks like we've got a regular to call a bunch last year. Looks like we got Larry on the phone. Hey, Larry, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be back. I got to tell you, it's great to have racing back.
We agree.
When you didn't have anything else, you got no baseball, you got nothing, and have racing, you can forget the rest. We got racing.
Yeah, that's right. So what's going on, Larry?
I think I really love Fernando Alonso. I like the way he drives, and I like his spirit and his passion. And he can absolutely work miracles in the wet. I think he might be one of the greatest wet weather drivers of all time. But Renault is a win-win for him, and it's a win-win for Renault, because right now Ferrari's clearly slipping, and McLaren is slightly rising. Mercedes is continuing to rise, and Renault's chasing. And to have a driver of Alonso's caliber to evaluate the car, to give his input, working with the engineering staff with his level of experience, and then for him to have the full confidence and backing of an actual factory team has got to be just everything that he has wished for a return to F1, and a way to really put his stamp on the sport and put a stamp on his legacy if him and Renault can rise beyond podiums to wins in championships. And I think that's a heck of a goal for him. And I think with his newfound maturity, being out of the sport, and his work with Toyota in the Endurance Series, I think he's a new man. I really do believe he's a new man, and I look for great things from him.
Well, there's a lot of people that are excited about this, and I was kind of mixed when I heard. I mean, my first reaction was, this is great. It's great for the sport. But then, there was a lot of chatter on social media about young drivers, giving younger drivers a chance and everything. But I think...
Hey, I got a question for Larry before we let him go.
Yeah, go ahead, Les. That's fine. That's all I really had. So go ahead.
Hey, Larry. So I know you think about all these team dynamics and things. Seb 2021 is a big question mark right now. But do you think he might be teeing up to do what Fernando did? Exit the scene a little bit, go do something else, and then return?
You thinking of Vettel?
Yes.
I don't know if he's worn out his welcome. Alonso clearly wore out his welcome, but his out of F1 activities really remade his image, and I don't know if Vettel is made of the same stuff as Alonso to be able to do that with his 4 championships. I think he has 4, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
With his 4 championships, I really don't know that he'll be able to do that. I hope so, because I think it's great for the sport. Yeah, everybody wants young talent, have the young guys come up, but you still have to have that veteran presence as coaches and with all that knowledge to help develop the cars. The young guys don't have enough experience behind the wheel to really give excellent feedback on a problematic automobile. And maybe, you see you need that veteran that's driven about everything, seen so many problems to be able to interface properly with an engineer to develop the car. And clearly Vettel is not helping Ferrari, and I don't think Leclerc has the experience to do that yet. I think it's part of Ferrari's slide. And maybe that's a big presumption on my part.
Interesting. Well, thanks, Larry.
Yeah. Well, Larry, hey, buddy, thanks for calling in. Are you on the road today?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of getting ready to roll. I got to deliver in the Buckeye and pick up in the Buckeye and be in Massachusetts next week.
I always look forward to hearing where you are across the United States in your big rig. So, Larry, thanks a lot, buddy. We appreciate you calling in. We'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Really enjoy the show. Glad to have you guys back.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if you want to call us up and join the show, 512-643-5483. Yeah, and we want to thank all the people that are watching online, because this year we are broadcasting not only on SiriusXM, but we on our social media channels. So on our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. We want to thank the people that are watching that way. But I alluded to it before the break. Let's talk about the new calendar. Formula One has added a couple of races, and I particularly want to get Dave O'Neill's opinion, because Formula One added Mugello and Sochi. So Mugello, first time ever hosting a Formula One race. Dave, what do you think about that?
Sorry about that. I am having connection problems. I got the bit about Sochi, John.
I was just going to ask you what you think about Mugello and Sochi being added to the calendar.
I think it's great. It's more for us to talk about, and also it makes it more of a championship. When it comes to giving the teams different circuits that they're good and bad at, I think it's really good. I did read somewhere that they may be having spectators at Sochi. I don't know whether that's true and how they're going to police it or go about doing it. But Mugello, I love the place. I spent many days there testing with Jordan, and it's a powerful circuit. There's a lots of twists and turns, hard on the neck, certainly for the drivers, and also on the car. It's not very kind to the car. So another circuit that's going to rattle the cars around. But yeah, it's really good to see these places coming.
When you think of Mugello, I mean, it's such a well-known track. It was not really a surprise, because I knew, but just thinking that the fact they've never hosted a Formula One race was, it's cool, because it's for one, it's Ferrari's home track, and they got to do some testing there, and in the very recent history. So that's good for Ferrari, which right now I'll take anything that makes the championship more competitive. I'm hesitating a little bit, guys, because I'm getting a little breaking news. It looks like Albon had to go back to the garage for a second. So now they're saying he's back out. So I don't know what exactly is going on with Red Bull, but he was going back to the garage, and now he's back out. So we'll see what happens with that. I want to keep you guys on top of that. But yeah, so Mugello is going to come right after the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. So that's set for September 11th and 13th. I'm assuming that'll be similar start time, like all these have. That's been nice, actually. The start of the season, all the races are starting here in the United States at 8 a.m. Eastern until we get to Sochi.
Yep.
So that'll probably be earlier, but yeah, Sochi will be a little earlier. There's our producer, Casey. What about Sochi, Dave? What's your thoughts on that?
Sochi, yeah, it's flat. It's a flat place. There's some some very, very fast change of direction there. Quite an interesting place, really. I don't know if you guys know much about the history of it. It was built mainly for the Winter Olympics. So when you fly in there, they tend to just open the airport up for the Grand Prix or whatever events they've got going on there, right beside the sea. And it's actually a very, very nice built circuit. Similar to Abu Dhabi in build quality, I guess. But great circuit. Also very difficult because they don't have much racing going on there. So when the teams go there, the cars tend to get quicker and quicker each session, just purely because they laying the rubber down and get into grips with the circuit. But yeah, I like Sochi. Quite good fun place.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, there's actually a little bit more breaking news. But when we come back, we'll be under 20 minutes to the start of the Styrian Grand Prix in Austria. You're listening to Speed City. Back after these messages.
Hi, this is Bob Varsha, commentator for Sports Cars, Barrett-Jackson, Collector Car Auctions, and more. You're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Well, we hope Bob Varsha's doing well. I know he was battling I think it was prostate cancer, and I think he wants us to talk about that, and I am hoping he is doing well. We got to get Bob back on the show soon. I was just talking to Jonathan. He's not with us today. He's up in Brainerd, Minnesota, doing the Trans Am race, but he was saying, yeah, we got to get Bob Varsha on the show. But speaking of Jonathan and I were talking, Dave, about the two new races in Formula One, and he said that his instant reaction was kind of what you said, is what made me think of it. He said, well, now we got us a championship, and I know that technically they've not only met the minimum rule of eight races when they first announced the season, but they modified the rules because we are not going to the three continents that you normally have to go to form a Formula One championship. They've changed the rules for the season. But, now that we're adding races and we're up to 10, it really is starting to feel like a championship season. And, that's a good segue for me because I actually ended up talking. I don't even know if I told you this, Les or Dave, but I ended up talking to Circuit of the Americas a couple of days ago. It's been awfully quiet around there lately, and for obvious reasons. And with the pandemic hitting really, really hard here in Texas, we're fearful. And COTA announced this week they're not going to have their MotoGP race officially. I mean, look, I'm going to be really surprised if anything happens at Circuit of the Americas this year because of the way things are going. Maybe late in the year, but I talked to them, and they just told me that they were officially going to announce the MotoGP race canceled for this year. But Formula One is, we're hearing all kinds of rumors. They're not ready to commit to anything yet. We've heard everything, and I've seen some quotes from the chairman, Bobby Epstein, talking about the possibility of having the race, not having the race. They don't know. Having it with fans, more than likely not, but having it without fans. So we'll just stay tuned to us. We'll stay on top of it.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate reality of the COVID is the street race venues are not likely to happen. Think of the expense of securing that and all that kind of thing. Whereas a venue where you have a limited entries and exits of it, it's easy to control and not allow people in there. I think, this is what COVID's done to us. That's where the setting is. With it would be hard to me for Formula One to justify coming over for a single race, even if they did a double race here in Austin. I certainly want them here, but I think that's the only way that it'll become justifiable is if they have a multiple race situation and that slim.
We just had, Les, you're right. It is, we just don't know what's going to happen. So it's obviously bad here. So we'll just have to see. I'm just excited that we've got 10 races and that the bubble appears to be working. We did have a couple of people try to escape the bubble this week. I know we had Leclerc go back to Monaco. There was somebody else, and Dave and I were talking. Who was it? Ricardo? Les, do you remember? But we had a couple of the drivers that left and went home, but obviously they went on their private charter flights or whatever. But
private bubbles,
their own private bubble outside the bubble, the mini bubble. But I think that Formula One is being Formula One, like you said at the beginning of last week's show, Dave. Formula One is Formula One, and they're going to do it right, and they're going to make sure that they are on top of the situation with COVID and making it as safe as possible. But I think that just having those two more races with more expected, and so we'll see what happens there. But hey, we haven't talked about this, and it's not going to affect the upper part of the grid. But Antonio Giovinazzi, you remember yesterday at the end of the first part of qualifying, he hit the barriers, but apparently he's been handed a 5-pace grid penalty to change a gearbox. He had originally qualified 19th ahead of Grosjean, but now the Grosjean starting from the pits, the back of the grid has been all shuffled up. But yeah, guys, let's talk about some more of what to expect today because we were just during the break we were talking about where everybody qualified, and I think one of the most interesting things going to be able is to see if Ferrari has pace. They are starting, and the starting grid for Ferrari now they're starting 10th and 11th. So we got Vettel in 10th and Leclerc at 11th. And number one, it's going to be exciting to see Leclerc trying to get around Vettel and seeing how Vettel handles that mental pressure because I feel like that's what's going on with Vettel. I mean, it's not like he's 40 years old or older and his physical skills, you'd expect them to degrade or something. But that'll be one of the most exciting things to see that. And Dave O'Neill, I want to get your take on Sebastian Vettel and his racecraft, or for lack of a better phrase. What do you think is going on with Vettel?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We go back to Alonso and Vettel, and Alonso, as far as I know, hasn't got any kids. He's not married. He's got a different path in life, whereas Vettel's very private. He's got 3 kids. And we all know, I mean, I've got kids, your view on life changes as well. When you get to a point and where you know the risks you take, and as you get older, sometimes you don't want to take those risks, and that's what made you in the first place. Was that you took the risks and you got the job done, and you concentrated. You had no other worries in life, and you were 100% behind what you were doing. So I think life takes a change for certainly Vettel. He does get critiqued a lot for sure. He has, he's proven he can win. He's won lots of races. He's fast. He's also very clever when it comes to those things. But I don't know. I'd probably hazard a guess that there's one or two things. The driver market's going to shake up, and he knows what's happening for 2022 with the new rules and cars, etc. Maybe he's waiting for that. Maybe, and on the other hand, maybe he's just had enough and rolling it out, collecting the last paycheck, and throwing his feet up and trying something else for the next 50 years or whatever he's going to do. But yeah, the other thing with Formula One as well is that there's always someone hot on your heels. He's got Leclerc there, and he's not going to stop going fast for 10, 12 years. So he's got that to worry about, and can he muster up that energy to beat him on the track, mentally, physically, training every day? Has he got that anymore? And that's the big question. Has he got it, and does he want it? When you haven't got any money in your bank, you want things more than when you've got money in your bank. So it's interesting. I don't know. I'd say he's at the point where he's probably he's not ready to give everything again.
Vettel, to me, it does seem strange because he can be fast still, and to me, it just feels like a mental thing. How would you know that? Nobody's going to know that except Sebastian Vettel himself. It just feels like a mental thing. Like I remember last year when he went out. Where was that? Where he went off track, and he came back right in the middle of the race. It was like a rookie mistake. It's just like he was panicking in his head, and it just feels like it's a mental thing going on.
Yeah, and the other thing as well to point out is when you go to Ferrari, you have to jump in completely. There's no sort of half in, toe in the water. You've got to be in there fully committed. It's a huge organisation, and you have to give everything that they give to you. So over the years we've seen people make it and also fail in Ferrari for one reason or another. So it's a huge undertaking for anyone to jump in and do that.
Yeah,
Especially maybe the guy.
Yeah, go ahead, Les.
It's interesting you say that because I feel like he's never really connected with the Ferrari organization. He wanted to wear red, but I don't see that chumminess that you saw with Schumacher and the gang, who it was all about us. I could just imagine Schumacher saying it's us, we're doing this and all that kind of thing. And I kind of see Sebastian not having that connection, though he may say those same words. I don't see that friendly, hey guys, let's go get a beer after this kind of personality and relationship. And I think that could also play into it.
Well, speaking of Vettel, one of our listeners, Kevin Kelly, just sent us a message, and it says, Haas willing to offer Vettel a 2021 drive. They're willing to offer.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, they're willing to offer them the drive. Are they willing to write the check? I don't know what that's going to take. What do you think about that, Dave?
Well, knowing Gunter as I know Gunter, he'll be getting it for a deal, that's for sure. So, yeah, it's like, maybe it'll be done on payment will be done on points scored, and some of the teams do that further down the grid. So when you get in the car, you make sure you do everything you can to get paid.
Hey, you know what? I mean, we're laughing about this, but how realistic is that? I mean, because it is the United States team. There is that factor there. Do you think that's even realistic?
Let me preempt that. Do you think it's realistic we can fix the brakes first? and I'm tongue in cheek, but that's an issue.
Yeah.
Yes, totally agree. But I think I'm correct in saying both of the drivers are out of contract at the end of the season. So there is a choice to be made. Maybe a mix-up is required. Complacency sets in, and of course there's some young talent floating around there as well.
You know, we get when you immediately mention the Haas drivers, Roman Grosjean comes to mind because, man, online, on Twitter and Facebook, he just gets hammered. And I know rightfully so because he's made a couple of mistakes, but he's proven it already this year. He's fast. I mean, he's had faster times than Magnussen already in a few of the sessions this year. And I mean, look, you know Grosjean. You've worked with him before. What do you think about Roman Grosjean as a driver, Dave?
Well, yeah, I mean, he does get a hard time. I mean, some of it is his fault. It's just his nature. You know, he attracts that. But I think in his heart of hearts, he is quick. His feedback is very good. That's one of the reasons he's still part of the team there. He has very good feedback. The other thing he doesn't do is he doesn't. If you look through the history of Haas, he doesn't, apart from when he first started, until Gunther got into him and made him understand it was all part of the team. He doesn't blame the team for stuff. So when he did spin off last week, we don't actually know whether that was, and I think it was, a car issue. It was the brakes. So he got hammered for that until people found out that it was a brake issue. So that's one of the good things about Roman. He is a team player. So the times he does make mistakes, he doesn't stand up and say, "Well, that wasn't me. That was the car." He takes it for the team, if you like, on that side. But if he was World Championship material, Mercedes would be writing a big check for him. So there is a difference, and that's where the differences lay.
I love that answer. I love the fact that you know that for a fact, and that because you're right, he's not. I mean, I've heard him complain on the radio, but he's in the heat of battle, right? Like get this car fixed, but he is the phrase consummate professional comes to mind when you think of the interviews. He's not throwing people under the bus, and he just kind of is taking the beating that he takes online. And you know what? Screw that online stuff anyway, because it's a bunch of people sitting behind a keyboard. But hey, guys, guess what? We are now about we are 5 minutes and 5 seconds from the second race of the season. So I want to start talking about, I was sitting there watching the coverage on television, and I was watching the drivers start getting in the cars. You know what I noticed? They just showed Daniel Ricciardo. Have you guys noticed that does he look leaner and like, I don't know if he's just, he's getting older. They're also young, but he looks thinner and leaner to me. Did y'all notice that about Daniel Ricciardo?
For sure. Sure. He does look power to weight ratio positive here.
There you go. That's right. All right. Well, let's start talking about what to expect today. I mean, I'm going to just run down just one more time to talk about the grid here, because I want to get you guys' thoughts. We've touched on a little bit about where where things look like they could go, but so it's Lewis Hamilton to Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon in 5th, Albon, Gasly, Ricciardo, Norris, Vettel, Leclerc in 11th, Russell, Lance Stroll 13th, Daniel Kvyat, who's looked good. Then Kevin Magnussen in 15th, Raikkonen 16th, Sergio Perez way down in the pink Mercedes down there in 17th. Latifi, we hadn't even talked about Latifi this show, and then Giovinazzi and Grosjean. But Les, let me start with you. Any surprises? Let's start with that, or and you can also it's about that time you can talk about your predictions.
Yeah. I think I don't know. In a way, Carlos Sainz being up there was a surprise to see McLaren up to the 3rd. But consider all the juggling, maybe it wasn't. My expectation is that Lando and Alexander Albon are going to charge from 6th and 7th and get up in the hunt early on. I think there'll be some attrition. Probably Carlos will float backwards and do the backstroke. And from there, I think that's the main thing. I'm going to be watching Sebastian to see if he can answer those projections of Ferrari having those updates and delivering today.
All right, what about you, Dave O'Neill? Oh, yeah, pretty quick. We're running short on time here.
Pretty quick. Okay, I'm going to see Perez up into the top 5. I'm going to see Verstappen win with Hamilton behind him and a little bit of trouble there, maybe. That's me.
All right. Well, I think that is I'd like to see that, so we'll see. And I'm just going to predict that Lewis Hamilton wins the race. Yay! I went out on a limb. No, I don't really have any big predictions. What I love is there's all these stories. There's tons of good stories that we can watch for today in the race. So we're going to let you guys go. We will be back after the race, but stay tuned right here on SiriusXM because we got the race coverage, the full race by the BBC. Thanks for tuning in to Speed City. We'll talk to you after the race.